My name's John Bartolomeo. Everybody calls me Johnny Bart. This is my YouTube channel. Hang out, get educated about prison without going to prison. All right, everybody, welcome back. A new week, a new episode. So last week's episode was the pendulum. This week's episode is something about the pendulum. It's a person, Kevin McTagert. You guys hear me talk about Kevin all the time. You know, he's one of the most influential people I've ever met in prison. He had a lasting effect on me. He gave me the greatest setup you could ever have in prison. I went to McKean. I sent him a letter saying that I was coming there. He was a friend of my friends, and some other guys knew him. Listen, sneakers under the bed, coat made, bed made. Best welcome I ever had at any prison in McKean, Pennsylvania, and that's where Kevin was at the time. One of the best guys I've ever met in prison. But why Kevin was so good is that Kevin's a gangster. He's, from the west side of Cleveland. He had a case with Danny Greene. Everybody hears that name. It's one of the, a name that resonates with anybody in Cleveland. It was one of the mob wars back in the early 80s. Kev's been in prison since the early 80s. He's not responsible for any violence himself, but there was violence in the case, and this is the reason why Kev is having such a hard time getting out of prison. Back then was old law, parole. You could get parole. Today you can never get parole. There is no such thing as parole. They don't even call it parole anymore. They call it probation because you can't get a parole. There's no parole in the federal system. So Kev's case was a parolable case. However, when the judge sentenced him, he said, you get life without parole. So now Kev's been in jail, I believe. I thought it was 1986, but I had an appearance on a podcast this weekend with Kevin's family and some friends of ours, and I'm going to get into that right now, and that's going to be basically what this episode is about, the podcast that we did. But I believe Corey McTaggart said that he's been in since 82. Picture that for a second. Think about the gravity of that. I was in jail for 27 years. I'm out now. It was out before, right? So, long journey. But, the payoff pitch came, and here I am enjoying my life. And just imagine Kev. Now, he's almost 70 years old. I believe he's right around 70. And that day never came for Kev. But Kev is the one that planted every seed that has grown in me today about being a better person, living a pro-social life, being part of the solution and not the problem. That's all Kev's work. Kevin McTagert did that. And there's another guy who, if you guys remember, Gritability was my first podcast I did, and that was Adam Clausen. He was sentenced to 214 years. I talked about him on the last episode. I talk about him a lot. He was the guy that they wanted to tell on Joey Merlino, but never would, of course. And, they sat him down and told him, hey, listen, if you lie about this guy, we'll let you go. So Adam's a solid kid, one of the best guys I know. And he had learned from Kev. He was with Kev earlier than me. He was with Kev in a penitentiary in Pennsylvania. It wasn't Lewisburg. It was the other penitentiary in Lewisburg. I'm lost for the name. Other penitentiary in Pennsylvania. I'll think of it in 1 second. But he was there with Kevin. He had Kev's teachings there at Allenwood Penitentiary. That was the Allenwood. So he had Kev's teaching before I even, knew Kevin. I knew Adam. But Kev he moved good with the staff and he moved good with the inmates. He had a bunch of perks there. He used to work overnight, do whatever. He used to, clean the facility at night. He'd go on a special crew. They went to the kitchen. They cooked. So Kev really had the run of the land at every place he's ever been, and he actually saved a staff member's life. Some people will frown on that, but I don't know if if the situation was, I think a girl was, a female staff officer was getting attacked, And, Kev kind of stepped in and saved the woman. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of what any gentleman would do, I think. I don't know. So I've never been in that situation. So I really don't know what I would have did. But Kev did that. And he's done everything that you could do to possibly get out of prison and to live a... So I had 2 shots, okay? And shots are disciplinary reports. I had 2 for assaults. Kev's been in prison since Napoleon was a cadet, right? And never had one instance of an incident report. Never talked back to staff, never did anything that could even be remotely construed as a disciplinary infraction. And he's been in jail for, I don't know, I think I got almost 40 years straight. Almost 40 years straight in prison. And guys like me and Adam are like the offspring of Kev. So we watched the example that Kev set, and we took, proactive steps to, better our conditions, better our environment, better ourselves, and actually get out of prison by petitioning judges. My sentence was up. Adam petitioned a judge. I had petitioned the judge many times and got denied. But I'm going to read you some of the stuff that the podcast we were on Sunday. I'm going to put my glasses on and show my age. So John Kiriakou is an ex-CIA agent. He was the guy that first reported waterboarding, that the United States government was using waterboarding as an interrogation tactic. That's how you know John Kiriakou. He's an ex-CIA agent. His podcast is Deep Focus. Okay, he's got 70,000 subscribers, and he wanted to feature Kev's case on his podcast. And I was asked to be a guest on the podcast with Corey McTaggart, who is Kev's nephew, Rick Harns, who is a retired United States Bureau of Prison executive and staff member. He was a captain. He was higher than a captain as well. I don't know his rank, but he was a very high-ranking individual within the Bureau of Prisons. He's supporting Kev's case. And Adam Clausen, who, of course, is the guy that had Gritability. It's Adam123 is free on Instagram, I believe. And us 3 and John talked about all the things that Kev has done thus far and still has not had any relief at all. And he's supposed to be it's supposed to be a parolable case. Let me read you a little something about John Kiriakou. It says he worked for the CIA from 1990 to 2004, serving both as an analyst and as a case officer. He was involved in counterterrorism operations, including work related to Al-Qaeda. In 2007 interview with ABC News, he confirmed that the CIA used waterboarding and called it torture. This revelation made headlines worldwide. He was charged under the Espionage Act for leaking the identity of a covert CIA officer to a journalist. He pleaded guilty to 1 count and was sentenced to 30 months in prison. Kiriakou served about 2 years in federal prison and was released in 2015. After prison, he's been the author and speaker and advocate for whistleblowers in prison reform, writing about his CIA experiences and time in prison. So John's podcast, Deep Focus, deserves a lot of credit for bringing light to my friend Kevin's case. And it's a case that is getting more attention and more traction. We have Adam, of course, who I told you in the last episode is a member of the Sentencing Commission in Washington, which is huge. Imagine an inmate actually sitting on the commission that creates the parameters and the mechanics for sentencing federal court cases. Imagine that. defendants in court cases. So I think that's, kudos to Adam. And listen, I spoke after Adam, and I kept asking John, I said, why do you make me keep speaking after this guy? And nobody could say it any better. He's a very eloquent speaker, a very good speaker. He is just a really intelligent person that is trying to do whatever he can because he knows. He spent 20 years in prison. We know what it's like in prison, and we know what it's like. They talk about aged out. I don't know if anybody's ever heard this term, aged out, but aged out means that you're at a point in your life where you're not going out and doing the crazy things you've done before. We can see that evident with me and evident with Adam. I'm trying to live a pro-social life. I'm not involved in any criminal activity that, on outward appearances, maybe like, being involved in organizations, being involved in, drug dealing and stuff like that. It's just not my thing anymore. I think I got too old for it. And I have the experience that I've had, of course, to just kind of want to do things a better way, a right way, so there's actually no consequences. I'm coming to the autumn of my years if I'm not already in them, and I just kind of want to enjoy my life. And, Sean O'Brien says it best. The best scam in the whole world, work. So, I taken a page out of his book, and he's played an integral role in trying to help Kevin McTagert. He's hooked Adam up with some, people in the pardons department and, the sentencing reform department, the pardon czar. And, John gave us some very good leads on some very, high-ranking people. So, there's a push for sentencing reform. John said, hey, can we get Kim Kardashian to champion Kevin's case, right? And I think that would be phenomenal. I'm saying, Kim Kardashian's a very influential person. Now, anybody with influence, they talked about, was Kev ready, to go home? And, people had said that, he might not be ready. There's still violence on the case. Because what Rick Harns said, remember, Harns was the high-ranking official in the BOP. He's retired now. He said that to get somebody to sign off in the Federal Bureau of Prisons for a compassionate release, there has to be zero risk. And when do you ever get zero risk, especially when there's a case that was marked by violence? Maybe not directly responsible Kev was, but so, people that are putting this foot forward to try to get Kev out are, doing definitely the right thing. I'm saying, I said to John during our interview on Deep Focus that, Kevin should be sitting here trying to get me and Adam out, because Kevin's the one that started us on this road to trying to better our lives and to just become, better people. And, what can I say about where I've come from? I've come from a place where I told you before that violence was the currency, where now humility is the currency. So it's a whole different, as they say today, it's just a different vibe. But it's not because I wanted to turn my life around. It's just the way that I feel. It's just the way that I've evolved and the trajectory that I'm on to where I'm going. I don't know. I don't know if I have a long time left or not, but I'm just trying to really enjoy my life. And, these are the things that Kev taught me that, you could go wax the floor, man. You're going to get better food. You're going to, you're going to be able to hang out. You're going to be able to get, all kinds of perks. It's not about, giving information. I'm saying, we talked about this in the last episode. It's about, having a sense of community wherever you're at. And, I don't know about you, but even especially when I was in prison, I used to clean the showers. I was a head orderly in a lot, clean the toilets because I wanted to live in a clean place. I don't care if you're dirty. I want to be clean. Cleaning up after people, I don't know. Yeah, it's not really fun, but you kind of have to condition people to clean up after themselves. And when you do such a good job, I think that, plants a seed in people. So, I just wanted to be the impetus for that, because Kev was the impetus for me and Adam turning our lives around insofar as just wanting to do better for ourselves and do better for our families and just do better as a whole. And I think, better sometimes is a subjective term, but I just think, my philosophy, of course, is I want to do one thing a day that makes my mother proud, because what happens when that happens? Nobody gets hurt. Nobody's disrespected. Nobody feels bad. Everybody feels good. And I just think it leaves everybody with, a good taste in their mouth. And I feel like I've accomplished something because, there's a lot of things in my life that I did that weren't good and didn't make my mother feel good. But to create awareness here, I got to give a shout out to John again and his podcast, Deep Focus. And when I find out exactly when it's going to air, I'll put some shorts up on my YouTube channel as well. But Bernie Kosar, what I was getting back to before, Bernie Kosar, who is an all-star quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. It's akin, if you're from Cleveland and you're from New England, Tom Brady, right? Bernie Kosar was like their Tom Brady. And Bernie Kosar actually opened up his house to Kevin McTagert. He petitioned the court with Kev, saying that if you let Kev out on a compassionate release, I'll make sure he's all set living at my house. I'll put my house up. I'll give you my word he's going to be there. So think about Tom Brady doing that for me. Obviously, it didn't happen. I'm saying it's a completely different case. But just think of it in terms of that. Put those two situations side by side. And think about that for a second. Bernie Kosar has nothing to do with Kev, didn't even know who Kev was, but started to research Kev's case a little bit and just said that to the court, actually motioned the court in Ohio and said, I'll let Kevin McTagert stay here. That's how sure I am that he's a changed man. And that's how convinced I am because of his record. Think about 40 years in prison, 40 years. So if 27 years is 10,000 days, think about how many days that is and not getting in trouble, not having one bad day, getting in trouble. Now Kev's old. He's almost 70. He's got arthritis in his hips like I had. He tells me all the time, man, I don't know how you used to work out. I used to see you work out all the time, and I'd be like, well, it must not be that bad. Now I got it, it's bad. But Kev's 70, so I had my hip problems when I was 40, a lot different. Huge difference, 30 years. I mean, think of how your body feels after 30 years of, using it every day. So just a shout out to everybody. Anything that you can do, if you can get on Deep Focus, if you can get on John's channel, maybe comment on it, try to find out, what John is doing and how we can advocate for Kev. Anything that you can do. I think that's the easiest way, because we could just go on to John's channel, which is right on YouTube. You're on YouTube now. Right to John's channel. Maybe a comment. Maybe drop him a message. Maybe, have his producer get back to you and say like, hey, what can we do for Kev personally? And I think that would be a great start, because we need the guy out of prison. If Kev left prison tomorrow, he's never getting in trouble again. It's a lock, a stone cold lock. I know it. Like, the guy's never, ever going to do it. He's going home and relax. He's 70. He's 70. You know what I mean? And he just wants to go home and relax. And, he's hopeful. And I think the pendulum is swinging in his way. And I think we're going to get some relief. I used to tell Kev, yeah, don't worry, you're getting out. Like, you always have to say that. But it's so hard to get out of prison. So easy to go to prison, but so hard to get out. You can fight every day. It's so discouraging. I've put in 20 motions to get out. I won a motion. The court agreed with me and said I was no longer a career offender. But at the very end of the decision, they said, however, it does not affect the length of your sentence. So disheartening. And it's a play on your mind every single day. The ebbs and the flows, the highs and the lows. And Kev has gone through that for 40 years. And it's time for Kevin McTagert to get out of prison. And anything we can do to raise awareness for Kev, we should do, because Kev's a great, great dude. Kev should be out here advocating for me and Adam to get out of prison. But it's been the reverse now. So please take a look at this case and take a look at Kevin McTagert. Get on John's channel, Deep Focus. See the podcast, see what he had to say. And anything we can do collectively would be, I'd greatly appreciate it because it's the right thing to do. If you believe in me, Kev was the impetus for making me who I am today. He's the one that engineered the steps I've made so far in prison and getting out of prison. And continue to like this stuff. Continue to watch it. The channel is growing, and I really appreciate everybody's viewership. I really appreciate, guys taking an active role and, sending comments and letting me know what kind of content that you want. Please continue to do that, because with the comments this week, next week's episode is going to be based on the content that you want. You pick it. Tell me what you want. You got questions? You can ask me anything. My life is a complete open book. So keep the questions coming. Keep the comments coming. Keep hitting the subscribe button. And thank you guys for watching. I'm going to be back next week.